Hello, it's just me. I'm coming to you solo. So, Josh and I weren't able to connect this week, but I'm going to try my hand at a little bracketology 101 for y'all. So, a lot of people who follow college basketball understand like there's a bracket and teams are ranked 1 through 16 and blah blah blah, but a lot of people don't understand how they get placed and kind of what bracketologists look at in order to place a team. Like, why is Miami, Ohio, who's undefeated, only a 10 or an 11 seed right now? And why is whatever a team like UConn a 1 seed when they lost at home to Creighton, who's not even going to make the tournament or something like that? So a lot of people don't really care about this stuff, but some people like to know how it works. So I'm going to try to nerd out a little bit here and explain how bracketology works for those who are interested. So if you're not aware, there's a website called Bracket Matrix. So basically what it does, I don't know, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't remember exactly when, someone started this site and said, hey, I'm going to group together all of the best bracketologists and I'm going to basically give each bracket a score and kind of sort the bracketologists by who's done the best over the last year, 3 years, 5 years, things like that. So it's called bracketmatrix.com. So I wrote into this site just a couple weeks ago and said, hey, I'm going to try my hand at this. I think I can do pretty decent. It's my first year. Wondering if you would add me to it. So if you go to bracketmatrix.com and you go to there's a section under links. If you go to the bottom, there's a section for newcomers, basically. So my site's called The Business. I had a blog that I used to run that I haven't touched in several years that I fired back up. So basically, I'm putting bracketology updates up there a couple times a week, and they were gracious enough to add me to the newcomer list. And I'm hopeful that when the brackets are actually released, my final update is competitive with some of the better bracketologists in the country. I'm confident. Obviously, I've never actually submitted a final bracket, but I've been monitoring my bracket updates against the seed list of all the different bracketologists out there. Some of them, a lot of them, the best bracketologists there are. And my seeds have been very consistent with kind of what other people are thinking. And even the best bracketologists, I don't know that there's been a perfect score. So they score these brackets. You get, just real quickly, you get 3 points for having a team seeded correctly. So if you have a team that's an 8 seed in your bracket and they are an 8 seed in the NCAA's release of the final bracket, you get 3 points. And then you get, you get 6 points. 6 points for having them seated correctly. You get 1 point for having them within one seed line, and then you get 3 points for just having that team in the tournament. So basically, a perfect score is whatever 68 times 6 is, because there's 68 teams. If you get every team correct and you get every team on the right seed line, you would have a perfect score of like, what's 68 times 6? It's like 408 or something like that. So you'll see the best bracketologists. I think the best score last year was 376. There always seems to be a team or two where it kind of doesn't make sense to most bracketologists, kind of what happened. So, you can see why 408 is pretty tough, but most good bracketologists can get in the kind of the 350s or higher. So I'm just going to share my spreadsheet that I've been going off of and kind of explain how this stuff all works. All right, so let's share this. So you should be seeing my spreadsheet. So basically, I have a spreadsheet where I track all of the bracket updates. So right now, you can see I'm showing you the team sheets tab. So basically, what every good bracketologist does is they rank literally every team in the country that is worth ranking. Obviously, like some like some team from the MAC conference who's middle of the road, who has like a 500 record, they're not going to make the tournament unless they win their conference tournament. So we don't really care where they're at unless they do win their conference tournament. Then we have to seed them somewhere. Every conference tournament winner makes the tournament. So whether you're 6-25 right now or 25-6, if you somehow win your conference tournament, you're going to make the field. All right, so let's go through this real quick. So team sheets, as I said, I have every team ranked by seed all the way from 1 to through the 1 seed through the 16 seeds. And then you can see down here, I kind of have a little bit looser notes on the bubble teams. So I'll kind of explain how this all works. So basically right now, if the bracket came out today, and just to let you know, this is updated as of yesterday afternoon. So obviously, like, Purdue lost to Michigan State at home last night. So obviously they're going to move a little bit. Michigan State and Purdue would move a little bit. And then, teams that have played them this year are going to either get a little bit better or worse based on how these metrics shake out after that game last night. So as you can imagine, on like a Saturday when pretty much everyone plays, like, this shakes up a lot. But basically, this is just a snapshot of where these teams are at a point in time, and that point in time was yesterday afternoon. So right now, obviously, I'm not going to go through every team, but Duke, a lot of people are saying they're the number one overall team. So if you look at the different metrics, so the most important metrics that bracketologists look at are the net ranking. So the NCAA came up with this net ranking, I think it was 3 or so years ago, maybe more than that at this point, to basically say, how good is a team? Like, it's kind of more of a predictive metric, but how good are you? Like, who's actually the best teams in the country? So right now, as of yesterday, like I said, Duke was number 1 in the net ranking. Now Michigan and Duke were very, very, very close. So, like, give or take, like, this could literally, if common opponents played on a given night and Duke and Michigan didn't even play, you could see this change slightly. But like I said, yesterday afternoon, Duke was 1 in the net ranking. The KenPom ranking is the best predictive metric there is out there. And what I mean by predictive is if a KenPom team is ranked, if a team's ranked better in the KenPom rankings, that tells you that they have a better chance of winning a game against anyone who's below them in the KenPom rankings. It's basically just a weighted average of the overall worth of any team. Now, the committee looks a little bit less at KenPom than they do at some of the other things because KenPom is predictive and some of these other metrics are, I forget, basically results based. So, like, if you, like, the net ranking more so than the KenPom ranking, if Duke beats Michigan by 55 points or they beat Duke by 1 point, the KenPom is going to take that 55-point victory and give them a lot more credit, whereas the net ranking is going to give them less credit because a win's a win. And these other metrics kind of along the same line. So SOR is strength of record. So how good are your wins? And then WAB is wins above bubble. Basically, how good are you compared to the bubble, or how many wins above the bubble, like where the bubble's at, are you compared to other teams? So, like I said, KenPom is maybe used a little bit less. The net, the strength of record, and the WAB, or the wins above bubble, are kind of the big ones that bracketologists use to rank these teams. Obviously, you've heard, depending how familiar you are with this, there's also quads of wins, right? So a quad one win is the best type of win. A quad two win is the second best type of win, all the way down to quad four. So a quad one win is going to be if you go on the road and you beat a good team, it's a quad one win. If you're at home and you beat a really good team, it's a quad one win. So basically, you get more leeway for beating a team on the road because road wins are harder to come by if you're traveling. Like if UCLA comes to, I don't know, Maryland on a weeknight. Well, Maryland's not very good this year, but you get what I'm saying. Like if they travel, let's just say UCLA plays at Michigan on a weeknight and they get a win, that's obviously a bigger win than if Michigan is on 1 day rest, traveling to the West Coast, whatever, coming to play UCLA at home type of a thing. And obviously beating Michigan is a great win no matter what because they're just a really good team this year, but you kind of get what I'm getting at. So basically, these bracketologists, what we do is just put all this together, and then you have to try to rank these teams. So like Duke, for example, okay, they're number one in the net, they're number one in the Ken Palm, they're third in strength of record, they're second in wins above bubble. As you can see, they have no bad losses. They have 0 quad 2, quad 3, or quad 4 losses, and they are 11-2 in quad 1. Also, they beat Michigan. Michigan is the second best team here, and they beat them. So head-to-head definitely matters. I would say head-to-head matters more when teams are very close to each other and you kind of need something to separate them. So right now, a lot of people would tell you that Duke is the number one overall seed. So one other thing I want to do here, I'm just going to pull this up because I've been talking about it a little bit. So this is the bracket matrix site. So as you can see across the top, these are all of the bracketologists. So, a lot of bracketologists would tell you Lenardi's not one of the best anymore. I mean, he's still very solid at what he does, but I think he just gets ranked first because he did have a very, very, very good bracket kind of back when this became a thing. And so he's kind of like the father of bracketology in a way. So he's ranked first. If you go out kind of to the right here, I will show you I'm just going to search for it. So this Dom, I forget what his first name or his full name is, but this guy has kind of been the best bracketologist over the past few years. He kind of ranks the highest consistently. So as you can see, these are kind of all of the bracketologists that have been doing it for a while and that are pretty solid. And then, like I said, if I go into links here, just real quick, I'll show you at the bottom here, you have new sites for 25, 26, and you can see the business. That's my blog. I made it on here for now, and depending how good my bracket scores out, that will determine kind of, how I rank on the bracket matrix site. But if I go back to the actual rankings, now you can see, so here's Lenardi's bracket, right? So this is his seed list. He has Duke as a 1, he has Michigan as a 1, he has Arizona as a 1. So it's a matrix, obviously, like it says. It has all these bracketologist rankings where they rank. Now you can see, you come over here to this BRODDD or DD. I don't know who that guy is, but he actually has UConn as a 2 and he has Iowa State as a 1. So most bracketologists would tell you that Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Connecticut right now are clearly the number 1 seeds if it ended right now. A few people, they'll throw an Iowa State or a Purdue or whatever in there. Honestly, right now, I don't see how you could say that any other team is worthy of a number 1 seed. If we just go back to my my team sheet here, like look at this line right here. So UConn has won 8 out of 10 quad 1 games. They're 8-2. Purdue has won 8 out of 13. So clearly 8 out of 10 is way better than 8 out of 13. UConn does have a quad 3 loss, but it's only 1. If you look at the metrics, so UConn's net ranking is 9, which isn't great for a 1 seed. But if you look at their strength of record and their wins above bubble, it's 4-4. Now, if you start going down this list, like who's as consistent as that? Who has 80% quad 1 wins and who also has good metrics kind of across the board. I mean, Purdue's better in their net ranking. They're clearly worse in their SOR and WAB. So who was it? Iowa State. Iowa State has a worse, or no, they have a slightly better net ranking, slightly worse SOR, and a much worse WAB. They only have 6 quad one wins. They don't have a bad loss, but still, I mean, like, someone who's going to tell you Iowa State's a 1 seed at this point, I don't know. I'm confused by that. It just doesn't make sense to me. So like I said, you go through, you rank all of this all the way down, and then you basically decide as a bracketologist kind of what's more important. What do you think the committee is going to determine is important this year, and you rank them. So I'll just kind of show you something here real quick. So if you go all the way from UConn as the last 1 seed all the way down to like BYU here, look at this. You've got quad 1 wins. You've got Florida has 9, so they're the best. And then, like, there's a lot of teams with only 6, but there's, what is that? 19 teams who have between 6 and 9 quad 1 wins. So depending on how you slice it and dice it, like, you could make a case for a lot of these, kind of one team being a little bit better than the other because they are so close. But that's where these extra metrics like the net ranking, strength of record, and the WAB, or the wins above bubble, come into play. So everyone loves to analyze the bubble, even though these teams typically don't really have a very good shot at winning the national championship. So right now, as of yesterday, I had Indiana as my last team in, and I had Cal as my first team out. Now, these teams on the bubble are really just have crazy, like, all over the board resumes. Look at a team like TCU. They have 4 quad 1 wins, which is really good. They also have a quad 3 loss and a quad 4 loss and a quad 2 loss, right? So, like, they've done some really good things. They've also shown that they're very inconsistent and they can lose to a bad team. And then you look at a team like Indiana, who's my last team in. Now look at this. They don't have any quad 3 or quad 4 losses, but they're 2-10 in quad 1, right? So it's just, they're clearly not as good in quad 1. They've won 2 out of 12, which is less than 20% of their quad 1 games. But they are more consistent. Like, they don't lose to bad teams. So like I said, every bracketologist looks at this stuff and says, okay, now what do I think the committee is going to do this year? It's not what you think is right, or what you think, which teams you think have merit. What bracketologists are trying to do is predict what the committee is going to do. So the one thing that the committee has done, I think, the past few years, and I know they did it this year, is they had an early reveal. So I believe this was last Saturday. They basically said, if the bracket came out today, here's what the top 16 teams would be, and here's how they would be seeded. Now, the best bracketologists look at this and they say, okay, now compared to what I was doing this year, how does their reveal stack up against mine? Like, what are they weighing a little bit more this year that they didn't weigh in the past? Now, if we look at that early reveal, here's the notes I have on the early reveal. Now, I don't have the top 16. You can Google it. Last Saturday was the 21st. Just Google it. CBS, I think it was CBS, came out, or maybe it was the NCAA site, came out with the top 16 teams for their early reveal. And here's the notes that I made that I think they're looking at and are saying are more important this season. So the strength of record and wins above bubble are very important, is the note I made. So at the time, UConn seemed to otherwise have a worse resume than a Houston or a Purdue. Now, Houston and Purdue have both lost since this. But at the time, I felt like Houston or Purdue was very competitive with UConn as far as their resume, but UConn was still ranked higher. So what does that tell you? It tells you the committee values strength of record and wins above bubble a little bit more than I thought they did. So that's just a mental note that I make when I put out my final bracket to say, here's what I think the committee is going to do. Head-to-head matters if teams have very similar resumes. Now, you remember I said this a little bit ago. Duke beat Michigan. You could make a case that Duke or Michigan is the one overall seed, but when they're so close, and Duke beat Michigan on a neutral floor just last Saturday, Duke's going to get the nod, right? And then the other one is your quad one win percentage might be more important than your total wins in quad one. So a team like, I think, Gonzaga, if I go back to the team sheet, you look at Gonzaga, they are 6-1 in quad one. Now that's only 7 games, but they've won 6 of them. So that's whatever, like 80 some percent, right? Whereas maybe like a Kansas, they have 8 wins here, but it's only 8 out of 14, right? They're 8-6. So based on that early reveal, it seemed like that quad one win percentage was a little bit more important than how many quad one wins you have. So you basically try to put together this huge puzzle, and then when Selection Sunday comes around, you post your final bracket, and you hope that you can get it right. Now, I think one of the reasons why it's hard for any bracketologist to get like really, really close to a perfect score is the committee is made up of several people. I want to say it's like, I don't know how many people it is. Let's just say it's a dozen. I think it's close to that. You have competing, like one person on the committee compared to the next might think certain things are a little bit more important. And overall, you kind of have to agree on that. But, what wins? Like, one person might say, oh, Tennessee really deserves a 5 seed because of this, and maybe they get their way. But then another person says, Virginia deserves a 4, like whatever team it is, because of this. And you kind of have to, like, they obviously have to make compromises when there's that many different people on the committee. And I think that's why it's tough for one mind or one bracketologist to really get close to that 408 mark, is because you're one person thinking versus a whole committee. And it's just hard for one person to really get what all those different minds in that room on that committee are going to do. All right. So one other thing to note now, people who first start getting into this are like, oh, the bracket. Yeah, I can rank these teams and put them in the bracket. And then they don't even look at the bracketing principles. So there's specific rules about the bracket that you have to follow when creating the bracket. So I'm just going to show you kind of what those are. So I'm going to go to bracket rules here. Now, this isn't super formal. These are just notes that I made for myself. So obviously it's not, it's not a professional looking thing, but this will help you understand kind of like what you have to do if you're actually building a bracket. So each of the first 3 teams from a conference go in different regions. So as I go through these and talk about these, I'm just going to bring up my most recent bracket, which is from yesterday. So each of the first 3 teams in a conference, so the best teams, the highest seeded teams in a conference, go in different regions. So there's 4 regions. The Washington, D.C. region, which is the East. Midwest is Chicago. South is Houston. Midwest is San Jose, California. So the first 3 teams from each conference, right? So Duke is the first team in the ACC. The second team in the ACC is Virginia. So Virginia has to go in a different region than Duke. And then the third team from the ACC is Louisville right now. So Louisville has to go in another region. So Duke's in the East, Louisville's in the Midwest, and Virginia's in the these both say Midwest. That's not right. This is actually the West. But you can see they have to be in different regions. Now you go through and you do the same thing for the Big Ten. So the Big Ten, Michigan, at the time of this, it was Purdue, and the third team was, I think I had Nebraska slightly above Illinois at this point. So Purdue, Nebraska, Michigan have to be in different. Same with the SEC, who's going to get a ton of teams. The Big East has 3 teams. You got to put them in different regions. So this puzzle, as you start building this out, it gets really complicated, and I'll show you even more rules why it makes it more complicated. So the next rule is no more than 2 teams from a conference can be in a region unless there's 9 teams from one conference. Okay, so you look at like the, let's go back to the bracket. You look at like the ACC, right? How many teams? I've got these color coded to make it easier, but so the ACC has 8: Duke, SMU, Louisville, Clemson, NC State, Virginia, UNC, Miami. Okay, so they only have 8. They don't have 9. So you have to put 2 teams in every region for conferences like that. Okay, if that's not tough enough, now look at the next rule. Actually, let's go down to line 4 here. Conference teams can't meet until the regional final unless 9 teams make it from a conference. Since the ACC only has 8, you basically have to move seed lines just to make sure that the bracketing principles are satisfied. So as you can see, this might get a little complicated. I'm going to try to explain this. So Duke is a 1. So where do the 1s show up? They're on the top of the bracket, right? 1, 16, 8, 9, 5, 12, 4, 13 are on the top in the region. And then 6, 11, 3, 14, 7, 10, 2, 15 are on the bottom. Okay, so Duke's a 1. So let's go back here. And now let's keep in our mind what's on the top and what's on the bottom. Duke's a 1. That's on the top. Virginia is a 4. They are also on the top. So you got 2 on the top. Louisville's a 5. They're also on the top. UNC is a 6, so they're on the bottom. So we got 3 on the top, 1 on the bottom. Now we go to, what's next? We got Miami, NC State, and SMU. I have all 3 of those teams as 9s. So now we're already at 6 ACC teams on the top. Well, teams from the same conference cannot meet until the regional final unless there's more than 8 teams. Well, the ACC has 8, and there's 6 that have to be on the top. So what do? There's a rule that says you can move a team 1 seed line if you have to satisfy the bracketing principles. So now already we're looking at, okay, what do? All right, so SMU is the closest to a 10 seed, and the 10 seed would move them from the top of the bracket to the bottom. So what did I do? I actually made SMU a 10 to try to satisfy the bracketing rules. So SMU becomes a 10, and you can see now they're at the bottom of the bracket. But I also needed to move another because there was 6 teams on the top in the regions. So now go through that and do that for every conference. So building the bracket, like someone who thinks they can, oh yeah, I can rank the teams. Well, when you start looking at it, it's really not that simple. Like there's so many rules that you have to follow. And I'll get into the rest of the rules in addition to the one that I just explained. So going back to number 3, so no same teams from a conference can be in a 1 through 4 or a 13 through 16 seed unless the conference has more than 4 in these buckets. So I think it's the Big 12 has more than 4. So the Big 12 has Texas Tech a 4, Kansas a 4, Arizona a 1, Houston a 2, and I missed Iowa State. Iowa State a 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So since there's 5, obviously you're going to have 2 teams in the same region as a 1 through 4 from that conference because there's 5 of them. But beyond that, you kind of have to keep at least 4 of them separate. So I have Houston in this region, Arizona in a different region, Kansas in another region, and then Iowa State and Texas Tech end up getting doubled up in a region. So again, that's another rule that you kind of have to keep in mind when you're building what you think is actually going to be the final bracket. Now some of these rules get a little bit more kind of suggestive rather than mandatory, but so no top 5 seed can be at a home crowd disadvantage in the second round. Okay. Have fun figuring out what that means. Like obviously proximity to where you normally play would be a big thing, but how do you really know if they're going to be at a home crowd disadvantage? So someone like me, I don't know that I can really look at that closely because there are so many other rules to satisfy. Another one is you can't play in a facility where you played more than 3 games already in a season. So you'll see a lot of these blue blood teams play games at Madison Square Garden. Like, I think Duke, Michigan just played at Madison Square Garden. And like some of these tournaments are at some of these venues where a lot of games are played. St. John's plays their home games at Madison Square Garden. So a team like that obviously, wouldn't be seated in a region where they could play at that facility. So things like that come into play. Another rule, the top seed from a region has to be paired with the fourth overall seed. So as you can see, I paired, since Duke was my number one overall and UConn was my worst one seed, they are paired on the left side of the bracket. Another rule, try to avoid rematches from the season and also from last year's bracket in the second and third rounds. So like Houston beat Duke, I think, last year in the tournament. So Houston probably isn't in Duke's quarter or region. So I think if I remember right, I put Houston in. I could have put Houston here, but I put Houston down here in a different region because I didn't want them playing Duke because I remember Houston beat Duke last year. So a ton of rules. It gets really complicated, but a lot of people, there's a lot of bracketologists out here who are trying to nail this. I don't know that anyone's ever going to get a perfect bracket, especially with everyone in the right region. It's just really, really hard to do. But I don't know. Maybe someday someone will get the perfect. It's called the Paymon score. So, like I said, if you get the team in the tournament, you get 3 points. If you get the team on the right seed line, you get another 3. So 68 times 6 would be a perfect score. And yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure no one's ever gotten a perfect score. There always seems to be, like I said, one team or a couple teams where like every bracketologist is scratching their head like, how did that team not get in, or how did that team get in? One other thing I want to touch on is just kind of how do you rank a team like I've mentioned them before in previous podcasts, but Miami, Ohio, right? They are undefeated and they literally have played almost no one tough. They're one quad one, or sorry, they have no, let me just pull them up. Miami, Ohio, right here. They have not played a quad one game. So that basically means they haven't really played the toughest type of game against a quality opponent. And their one quad two win is against Akron. And I think it might have been a home game. I'm not sure, but they beat Akron by a few points, if I remember right. Now they have 9 quad 3 wins and 15 quad 4 wins. So as you can see, if you look at their KenPom ranking, they're 83. Look at this, 83 compared to, look at all these around them. We got lots of 30s, 40s, 50s. They're 83. So basically, they're not even the best team in their conference. If they played Akron right now in the MAC title game, Akron would almost for sure be favored to beat them. But since they have won all those games, you still got to beat the team in front of you. And even some of the better teams have lost a game against a quad 3 or even a quad 4 opponent. So you look at their strength of record and their wins above bubble. Look at this, 22. This is better than all these teams all the way up to St. John's, who's projected a 6 seed. So very, very good strength of record. Again, their wins above bubble, 32. That's better than all the way up to the top 9 seed, which is Miami. So very, very solid metrics there. And then their net ranking isn't bad. I mean, it's not super competitive with like these 9 and 10 seeds if you look at it, but they're 48. Like, they're not terrible. Like, they're competitive. I'm very interested to see what would happen if. So I think Miami, Ohio plays Western Michigan tonight. Western Michigan is not good, but it is a road game. Let's just say Miami, Ohio loses to Western Michigan. This net ranking is going to go down into the 50s for sure. This strength of record is probably maybe going to slip into at least the 30s. Wins above bubble probably slips into the 40s. So a bad loss for a team who hasn't played anyone good would be really bad. But if we lay out the scenario of, okay, Miami, Ohio wins the rest of the regular season games, they make it to the MAC championship, they play Akron and they lose, I really do think the committee would put them in. That loss against Akron would only be a quad 2 loss, possibly. I don't think it would be a quad 1 loss, but So they'd have one quad two loss. They'd have one loss on the season. I do think Miami, Ohio would make it. Um, so they would be essentially a bid stealer because Akron, by winning that game, would win the MAC championship. And then Miami, Ohio would get second in the MAC. They'd have one loss overall. And I do think the committee would put them in. And, deservedly so. Like they haven't played anyone good, but like I said, it's still hard to win every single game. You're still going on the road in conference, teams that know you pretty well. Do I think that they would have a chance of making it very far in the NCAA tournament? Absolutely not. Their KenPom rankings 83. They would be a large underdog in their very first game, no matter who they played. But sure, give them a shot, right? A lot of these bubble teams don't really have a prayer of making it super far anyway. So, um, aside from that, if we just go back to the bracket, so most of these bracketologists are publishing updates a couple times a week, usually Monday morning, or I should say Monday, and then like a Thursday or a Friday update is usually in order. A lot of teams play 2 games a week, so if you give it 3 or 4 days in between updates, a lot of teams have played, and it kind of gives the metrics a chance to kind of recalibrate themselves, so that a lot of bracketologists will put out a new update. So, real quick, let's just talk about who we think, or who I think there's no one else on the call, but who I think has a good chance of winning it all. So obviously Duke's the number 1 overall seed right now. If it ended, they are very good. I do think you'll hear analysts say that having upperclassmen guard play in March Madness is a big thing, and also a lot of times having your best player be a guard and not a forward. So Cam Boozer is a forward. It just seems like teams like that sometimes can get exposed when they don't have juniors and senior guard play, and their best player that they kind of go through as a forward. A really good team can sometimes neutralize a player like that. Now, granted, Duke is a little bit of an outlier in that because they are probably the very best team in the country right now. But I don't know. When it's all said and done, I just don't think that Duke really has the best chance of winning it. I would rank, I still think a team like Michigan is maybe a more complete team. Same with Arizona, UConn. I think Hurley's the best coach in the country. I don't know that they're obviously good enough to win it, but if I had to pick 2 or 3 teams, UConn's probably not one of them. I think I would go probably Michigan, Arizona, and up until a couple games ago, I would have said Houston, but they're kind of not playing right now, playing well right now. Granted, there's a couple games left in the regular season, Big 12 tournament. They could obviously turn it around and start playing a lot better. I don't know, a team like Florida, they won it last year. I think it would be hard for them to repeat just because you're going to obviously get every team's best game when you won it last year. But they're playing better than anyone else in the country. I don't know how many games they've won in a row, but as you can see, I think maybe only 2 weeks ago they were down here in the 4 seed line, and they just keep moving up because they keep winning games, and they've been blowing out some teams as well. So obviously Florida with Golden as their coach, they won it last year. Obviously they're good enough to do it. Who else? I don't know. I think Illinois is going to get exposed. I find it hard to believe that they're going to play consistent enough to really make it all the way. Who else? So really for me, it's kind of Michigan, Arizona. I'd like to think Houston, but they're not really playing that well. Obviously, Florida's right there. You would have thought Purdue was looking really good, but then they lose at home to Michigan State. So there really isn't that many kind of pure teams when you're looking at who's going to win it all. But I really do think it's going to come. I think the winner this year is going to be one of these, I kind of pull. I don't know. I think Mark Few's a really good coach, and Gonzaga. Like you look at their Ken Palm ranking, they're 10th, and you look at their net ranking, they're 5th. Like I do think they're really good. So I'm gonna give them a chance. Maybe that's a little biased. I couldn't argue with you if you said Purdue. You think Purdue has a better chance at winning the national championship than Gonzaga? Like I couldn't argue with that, especially because Braden Smith is a really good guard. He's a senior, and Purdue is very talented. Um, who else? I don't know. Like I never count out Bill Self, although they've been pretty inconsistent. How do you count out Izzo? They've been playing well lately. They've kind of been a top 20 team pretty much the whole year. And then after that, it kind of gets a little bit watered down. Like Texas Tech, JT Toppin's out for the year. He's their best player. Like I don't see a scenario where they play well enough to win it all. Who else? I would say possibly Alabama, especially if they get a top four seed, just because they've made Elite Eights and I think they made a Final Four recently. But beyond that, like I don't know, like some of these teams are ranked and people think they really have a legitimate chance at winning the national championship, and like they just they just simply don't. Like if you look at from year to year, like who wins the national championship, it's almost always a team that was a top 10 Ken Palm team heading into March Madness. So where does that leave us? Let's look at that. Here's the Ken Palm ranking. So it's no surprise that your ones and twos are all top 10. Illinois has a very good Ken Palm ranking. Again, I think it just seems like they play really, really well. They can play against like they can match up against any team, but then every once in a while, like, are they going to be able to string 6 games together and win the national championship? I don't know. So you've got Gonzaga, Illinois, and then basically the ones and two seeds at this point, who I would say have a legitimate chance of winning. Obviously, again, a well-coached team like a Kansas, a Michigan State, an Alabama, they could, if they play really well, you could see them make a Final Four and possibly win it. But whatever. I mean, everyone has their own opinions. Duke's the best team in the country, and I just kind of told you that I don't think that they're going to win it all. So, but that's the good thing about this. Every bracketologist has their own opinions. And so I encourage you to submit your bracket to Bracket Matrix and see if you can get on the newbies list, and we'll compete and see who can get a better score when it's all said and done. All right. That's enough for today. I'm going to call this Bracketology 101. Hopefully those of you who watched learned something on how this actually all fits together. Obviously, when I started getting into this, even though I've loved college basketball for years and years and years, like a lot of this stuff is things I didn't know. So there's a lot to learn, and I hope I learned you something good today. All right. Until next time, happy bracketologizing, and we'll smell you later.